Ours. Our VSANA seminars are an educational series intended to inform and educate viewers about the ancient Asian art of viewing stone appreciation. We believe that an informed stone collector is on his way to becoming a stone connoisseur. The Asian art of viewing stone appreciation consists of three overlapping practices: Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. To fully understand Asian stone appreciation, I believe that it's important to be informed about each of these countries' approaches and how they have influenced each other. We at VSANA do not favor one country's approach over another country's method of appreciating unusual rocks. Today, we're presenting an introduction to Korean viewing stone appreciation. Suseok is a Korean word for viewing stones. In the presentation today, you will see both Chinese and Korean characters presented. Korean scholars use Hanja, or Chinese, as the official language of the literati and government until modern times when the Korean native script, Hangul, was used. Korea has an ancient practice of viewing stone appreciation in Asia. I believe it may be the second oldest after China. And I firmly believe that they have the second largest number of people collecting and displaying viewing stones in the world today, more so than in Japan. Most viewing stone enthusiasts in Western countries are familiar to some extent with Chinese and Japanese practices. However, they are largely ignorant of the rich and documented history of Korean Suseok. This is due in part to the lack of accurate information in English on the subject. The term Suseok was used by Suseok Young-hee in the mid-1800s in the establishment of the Old Moss Pond Pavilion. This was approximately 100 years before the first recorded use of the word suiseki in Japan. If you look at the sign that's hanging from the ceiling, the first two characters on the right are the are of the Suseok, represent Suseok. Now, the Korean term Suseok translates as the long life of stones. Early Korean scholars believed that rocks lasted an eternity and were indestructible. This belief was adopted from the Chinese doctrine. Korean Suseok practices were highly influenced during the Ming and Qing dynasty. Koreans first adopted the Chinese methods, but slowly developed an ambiance of differences, reflecting Korean aesthetics. The aesthetics of naturalness plays a key role in Suseok, more so than in China or Japan. They like in Korea to avoid feelings of grandeur and exaggeration. And they also emphasize natural as opposed to contrived. And by that, they mean stones that have been worked, carved, pieces removed, or even manufactured. And they feel that this is too prevalent in both Chinese and Japanese stone appreciation. The Korean peninsula is roughly the size of the state of Minnesota in the US and slightly smaller than Greece or the UK in Europe. The peninsula has an abundant, extensive coastlines and over 3,900 islands. Korea is also geologically stable compared to the tectonically active Japan. In Korea, there are many vast amounts of metamorphic and sedimentary rocks, while igneous rocks are less common. There are over 5,000 miles of coastline and thousands of islands. Initially, most of the Suseok were collected from rivers and in the mountains. However, the construction of dams on the major rivers to produce hydroelectric power eliminated many of the good collecting sites. This resulted in a shift to collecting stones from beaches and islands in more recent years. If you look at the map of South Korea, you'll see the lighter yellow uh, along the right side. These are the low mountain ranges that extend in a north to south direction. And the rivers, as a result of that, the rivers are flowing primarily from east to west. The Han and Nanhan rivers are two famous collecting sites. And you can see near Seoul, to the right of Seoul, is the Han River and the Nanham. They join together. Rivers in the southern part of South Korea tend to flow south in the southwesterly direction or to in a southerly direction. Early indications of appreciating stones for their aesthetic qualities can be traced back about 2,000 years in China. Then the Chinese literati embraced attractive or unusual stones in China, especially since the Tang Dynasty. Dozens of poems about fantastic stones are known in classical Chinese literature. The great Tang Dynasty poet Bai Juyi composed over 2,800 poems, including records of Taihu stones and a pair of stones. The latter poem describes a pair of Lake Tai stones he treasured. Mi Fu, a Song Dynasty calligrapher and avid stone collector, laid the foundation for appreciating stones when he developed almost 1,000 years ago a rhyming four-character set: Shou, Lo, To, and Zol. Shou, it means thinness; Lo, channels; To, holes; and Zao, wrinkles. And these features have been used for evaluating Chinese stones and other stones up until even to the present. If we can see, I mentioned there was a strong influence of Chinese stone appreciation practices on the Korean. These are photographs of three large stones that are displayed in the Imperial Palace or Forbidden City Gardens in Beijing. Notice how the stone carved basins or pedestals are used to hold and orient these stones. Approximately 1,600 years ago, in Goguryeo uh, period, Korean King Solsurim had an artificial pond dug and lined it with rocks. He had this done in Korea, and he created artificial mountains using many stones. And the use of this stones in this manner followed Chinese practices. The Chinese sent many scholars and bureaucrats to China to learn about governance. The picture here is of the Lions Grove Garden, part of the Lions Grove Garden in Suzhou, China. And we think that this garden or others similar to this served as a model for King Soserim to build his garden in Korea. Here are two uh, garden stones displayed in uh, Korea now. And the emphasis is on completely natural, unaltered stones in gardens and indoors. And you'll notice that the stone basins that they're displayed in are similar to those used in China. Now, if we look at the Chosun dynasty, starting in 1392 and extending to 1910, this is the period when the arts flourished in Korea. The Yanghwa Sorok was a first pre-modern gardening book published in the Chosun dynasty. This book, a little treatise on Korean floriculture, was published about 1462, and it describes the growing of 16 different plants in pots. It also includes a reference to the early use and appreciation of stones used in gardens. Early Suseok, the concept of growing moss on water-absorbing stones should be recognized as an original Korean approach to stone appreciation. This was described in the book I just mentioned. And early stone collectors believed that as moss grows, it creates a sense of ancient beauty and a reflection of the passage of time. According to Korean stone connoisseur and friend Bak Yul, moss grows easily on limestone rocks because they readily absorb moisture. In more recent days, stone collectors prefer harder, better quality stones that were found in the rivers. Also, trying to keep these moss-covered arrangements in a sunny location and properly watered was a daily challenge. We can further see the influence of Chinese practices on the Korean in this 19th century book. It was an album of inkstone paintings. It consisted of 8 leaves embodying a theme loved by literati artists throughout East Asia, famous stones and ink stones. Another 2 illustrations in this book. Uh, this is further, as I mentioned, further evidence of the Korean literati embrace the qualities of unusual stones for their aesthetic qualities. And the text here is translated in the box on the upper left. The little stone in the pavilion called Brojen, its form will be treasured for 1,000 generations. Under the spring lamp, I painted its silhouette. My inspired work almost rivals that of Mi Fu. Mi Fu came up with the rhyming uh, set of characters for evaluating stone about 1,000 years ago. So here, approximately 400 or 500 years later, we're seeing Mi Fu's influence continuing not only in Korea. Even in the 20th century, the Korean artists painted unusual rocks with flowers, the immortals, or landscapes, instead of just painting the rocks themselves. Chinese scholars often painted rocks without any accompanying objects or with flowers, both ways. We don't know yet how common this is, that all the Korean rock painters uh, used additional items like uh, plants, flowers, people, but we hope to find out in the future. The Korean literati believed that the rocks are a symbol of long life and that large rocks are the home of mountain spirits. This example of this piece of artwork was recently acquired by the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. In addition to painting, we can see a long history of poems inspired by stones. Many consider Yi Wang the most important philosopher in Korean history. His interpretations of Neo-Confucius writings was influential throughout Asia. His impact was so significant that his image is used on the Korean 1,000 won banknote. Yi even composed a poem about rocks. The later, about 300 years later, Oksu Jo Myeon-ho published a book, Tribute to Stones. It is a example, it's relatively unknown, but it's an important example of how Korean literature, Korean literati, the scholars, embrace unusual stones. Oksu is Jo Min-ho's artist name. And he wrote poems based upon viewing stones on his desk, about stones he had given to friends, and stones that alluded to the future. He refers to stones that exist in the heart and mind. We are in the process of working with a Korean scholar to have the tribute to stones translated into English and hopefully available by the end of this year. And then even today, there are living poets who are writing about stones. The poet Kim Min-jung is a great example. Kim, or Mrs. Kim, has published two books, one in 2002 and the second in 2020, of Saijo style poetry based on stones that she has in her collection. Japan occupied and ruled Korea from 1910 to 1945 and attempted to replace the Korean language and arts with Japanese and Japanese style arts. And this was best summarized by Hannah Kim in an article she published recently. It was only a short time after Korean aesthetics began awakening to its own national identity that Japan colonized Korea, which again robbed Koreans of their chance to produce and discuss art on their own terms. In the 70 years since the signing of the armistice, Koreans have begun to address aesthetics in art and beauty in their own terms. This sentiment also applies to the Korean aesthetics of appreciating stones. It's only been in the last 7 decades that Suseok has developed into its own distinct form. In November of last year, we had the privilege of visiting Korea and meeting with several leaders of the Korean Suseok Association and learning firsthand about the modern period. There was a rapid expansion in the popularity of viewing stones and the number of collectors in China, Korea, and Japan, beginning in the 1960s and continuing through the 1990s. Since then, there has been a slow but steady decline in the number of viewing stone collectors, especially in China and Japan. We were surprised, however, to find that the numbers of stone collectors and activity relating to stone appreciation is still flourishing in Korea. There are frequent local displays, several major national exhibitions held each year, and the poet I mentioned to you is shown on the left with some of her stones. Displaying Suseok indoors. We'll take a look at this. In Korea, connoisseurs of Suseok like to display their prized stones on older traditional antique furniture. Their display methods are more closely aligned with Chinese practices rather than the Japanese display methods of using a tokonoma. And we're in the process of learning more about Korean ways of displaying stones indoors. Uh, did you know, some questions for you. Did you know that there are about 80,000 people practicing Suseok in Korea? Many more than in Japan or in other countries outside of China. They have an estimated 200 Suseok organizations, clubs mainly. They hold about 100 public exhibitions of stones, just stones, in 2003 and a comparable number in 2024. There are about 500 shops selling stones throughout South Korea. And there are 10 Suseok auction channels on the internet. Korean stone collectors have been more successful in utilizing the internet, particularly through videos, to showcase their collecting activities and exhibitions compared to their counterparts in China or Japan. Also are 17 Suseok museums in South Korea. Some of these are privately owned collections that are open to invited visitors from time to time. But there's also a number of nice government-supported museums that are open to anyone on a regular basis. The Korean Suseok Association was established in 1981. They hold an annual meeting early in the year. They sponsor nature conservation events, stone hunting competitions in the spring. And then in the fall, late fall, they hold a national exhibition. In addition, there's a privately published monthly journal, Suseok Munhwa, that effectively unites the many collectors and clubs throughout South Korea. It has special articles, news from clubs, photographs of stones, um, and contact information about the many stone dealers. Each month, this journal of 200 to 300 pages is issued and distributed to subscribers. If we look at the main categories of stones recognized in Korea, the most popular set of categories are the landscape stones, object stones, color or pattern stones, and abstract stones. There are other ways to classify unusual rocks in nature, but this is the most widely used. These four broad categories also have subcategories that have been established within. Let's look at a few examples of landscape stones. Note how the color and choice of the suban complements the color and form of the stone. Look at in the upper left-hand side. And the stone on the right, the color and form of the wood base matches the stone beautifully. I feel that this carved wood base has been influenced by Japanese base making techniques. These are all natural stones and have not been altered to make them more explicit. Object stones are stones that resemble objects in nature, such as a bird on the left, or on the one on the right, it could be a seated Buddha or person. And these stones have forms that remind people of real or imagined figures. Note the bases on both of these. These are typical Korean style bases with a lighter color wood that's not stained, but left so that the grain of the wood is obvious. Color or pattern stones. Many exciting and beautiful color and pattern stones are found in Korea. They challenge the imagination of the viewers. The abstract shape pattern of the stone on the left reminds me of a Chinese Taihu stone. The one on the right suggests a dragon roaring with a dark cloud overhead. Can you see that on the stone? Abstract stones. I love abstract stones because they offer the most significant opportunities for interpretation. It's fun to study an abstract stone over time and explore the ways it stirs my imagination. In some cases, it can be linked to Buddhism or Taoist beliefs. The stone on the right can be interpreted as representing one of the 10 gateways to heaven in Taoist beliefs. This is one of the great joys of viewing stone appreciation. Note also the bases. We'll talk about that a little later. Also, stones are categorized by the source, rivers, mountains, uh, sea, and rivers were a primary source of collecting sites for many years, and they still are. However, extensive dam building on the rivers has eliminated many of those sites. And following this development, many collectors shifted to the beaches and shallow waters and islands off the coast. Here's a Nanham River stone. It's a beautiful stone, in my opinion. The sleek, layered black stone, elegant, gives up an appearance of a plateau with a low mountain range in the far distance. I like the feelings of this stone and the layered effects of it. It's one of my favorites. Additional Nanham River stones. When I look at these two stones, I see the subtle beauty found in rocks that have been weathered for thousands of years. How many centuries did it take to develop these forms and surface patina? I smile when I compare the beauty found on these rocks with the fleeting beauty seen in the short lifespan of a person. Notice also the base in the stone on the right, a very modern style base as opposed to a more traditional Japanese style influence base on the left. In this Nanham River stone, does this represent one of the coastal islands off the seashore? It's a beautiful display of an excellent rock, complemented by the sand and the shape and color of the tray. The elegant black stone has an aged appearance that is also serene. I love looking at the detailed features of this rock. It's one of my favorite displays. This is a typical Korean subon, or glazed ceramic tray. Suseok, or sea stones, are those found on beaches and shallow coastal waters. They became so popular that a sea stone society was founded in 1989. The Busan Haeseok Society was the first organization devoted to these stones. The sea stones tend to be more rounded and uniform in shape. They may be egg-shaped or ovoid, not with sharp angles or not like typical landscape stones. And it's the movement of back and forth on the seacoast that causes them to be worn in this form. Here are two examples of the sea stones, the scream on the left and husband and wife on the right. These two are from the private collection of Kim Min-jung in Seoul, Korea. Korea is fortunate to have extraordinary stones with different mineral deposits suggesting different types of flowers. These Hwamun-sok stones have to be ground and polished to highlight the flower-like formations. Since they have been enhanced, some Korean stone collectors do not consider them as true Suseok. I find the stones to be very appealing and marvel at the patterns. It makes me want to learn more about the geological processes that form these rocks. These fascinating flower pattern stones are admired for their beauty and ability to suggest flowers. Korean flower pattern stones are sometimes referred to as mi-sok, or beautiful stones. This term was derived from the Chinese name for beautiful rocks. This particular Korean flower stone was acquired on one of our many trips to Asia, and it was displayed in an exhibit at the Korean Cultural Center in New York City in 2021. Now, let's look at the essential elements of a good suseok. Uh, these are taken from information published in Korean language introduction to suseok books. The form, it must be natural, not modified by man. The stone must also show depth, hardness, dignity, and must stimulate the imagination. In color, the dark black color is best. Dark brown and blues are good. However, the sea stones, the haeseok, are sometimes more colorful and don't quite fit this, but they're also a more recent development in suseok appreciation. The texture and surface should have wrinkles and holes, and all of these contribute to the allure and uniqueness of the stone. The stone should be hard, not easily scratched, and they must also exude an aged elegance. Wrinkles are key in giving a stone its aged elegance. Also, the other distinct characteristics of Suseok can be summarized in the statement: Suseok is a symbolic representation of the essence of natural elements. It possesses an eternity and immutability that humans cannot obtain. Therein lies its beauty. Many serious viewing stone collectors believe that the beauty of Suseok does not reside in the stone. Instead, it lies in the aesthetic sensibilities of the viewer while observing the stone. It's a unity between the Suseok and the viewer that the beauty of Suseok is revealed. Other information about the distinct characteristics of Suseok is taken from another introductory book published in Korea. It lists three aesthetic elements that can be sensed in a single stone: symbolism and association, something evoking something grand from something small. One should be able to sense the grandeur of a scene of nature. Idealized natural beauty and sublime elegance. And no matter how much idealized natural beauty a stone possesses, without aged appearance, the stone lacks poise or a sense of serenity. And you'll notice that these features that we talked about here and in the previous slide uh, share a common theme with Chinese and Japanese stone characteristics. Let's look for a couple of minutes at the yade, or the carved Korean carved wood bases in Korea, as they're known. And some of these, not all, but some of the Korean bases are finished lighter in color, not stained, so that the prominent natural grain in the wood can be seen. Also, if you look at the upper part of this base, there's a prominent lip coming up holding the stone. The lip in Korean stone, some of the bases are much more conspicuous than the lip in Japanese style bases. And then the short bulbous legs is another distinct feature. Not, as I mentioned, not all of the Korean wood bases are like this, just some of them. You can see other influences in other types of bases. Now, the haeseok or sea stones, beach stones, are treated differently. These tend to be rounded or oblong, egg-shaped, and these are typically displayed in a simple cup-shaped base that's been stained. I believe these are made from the Korean pine wood or another softwood. And in a display, the fourth Korean Ocean Stone exhibition in 2015, over 95% of the stones were displayed in this type of vase. The simple base is better suited for the relatively basic form of beach stones. Here are four examples of Korean bases, distinct Korean bases. Notice the prominent lip on the upper part, and these type of bases are referred to as lip and socket, where you have a socket that the stone fits into, a lip that comes up around the base of the stone to help hold it in place securely. Notice how the bases are widest at the upper part and taper down to a narrow base, and that the feet are usually more conspicuous than in Japanese suiseki, but not all of the Chinese made bases. In the wood used in Korean bases, they often use native Korean woods. The zelkova is a relative of the elm in the elm family, has a light golden brown, yellowish brown color and a beautiful grain. The Korean walnut has a pale brown to darker chocolate with brown streaks. It's very hard wood, comparable to the uh, black walnut in the US and the walnut found in Southern Europe. Makia, the amur, in the legume family. It's a softer wood and a bright yellow sapwood. Prunus serrata, Oriental cherry, is a hardwood that has reddish or reddish brown color, very fine grain, and makes a beautiful base. And then the softer wood from the Korean pine is easy to work with, rose colored, and it's sometimes stained, as you saw in the bases for the beach stones. They also use some non-native woods. The jackfruit, Atrocarpus, turns reddish with age. Red sandalwood, rosewoods, shoria, and other species. Now, if we look at holding and oriented stones, not in wood bases, but in trays, uh, we find that fired or glazed porcelain trays are used more often than bronze trays. And the Korean term for the trays, subon, is widely used. And these subons, ceramic trays, are very effectively used in stone displays. And trays that have a long record of ownership are highly prized. The Koreans make some fantastic, excellent ceramic bases as well as bronze or copper alloy bases. Korean artisans have made many excellent dongsuban, bronze and copper trays. Their designs are often exquisite. They use both shallow and deeper bronze tray, depending upon the size and weight of the stone. Carved stone basins are rarely used indoors. And we don't see them. The basic principles for use of subans, according to the manuals that we've seen, is that a rectangular suban is used with neat stones. Now, what in the world does neat mean? Neat, I think, refers to stones that are more angular, have sharp angles, more block-like than, say, a mountain stone or other types of landscape stones. Oval suban is used with majestic stones, and Suseok can be seen from all angles. And I hope you've noticed the word suban is very similar to suiban, but it's the proper Korean word is suban. Taller stones, imposing, stately stones go well in a deep uh, metal tray or pot in this case. This is from a collector in New York. And the sand is used. And Korean stone collectors regularly spray water on stones displayed in trays with sand, more so than I see in China or Japan. And watching the patterns on the stone as the water dries, or watching water slowly drip from a key location, may be linked to the aesthetic concept of fleeting beauty, temporary beauty. If you look at this stone and the archway in the lower center, you can see a single drop of water clinging there ready to fall. This was a aspect that Korean stone collectors love to see or watch, that water and dripping from a stone. The sand, it neutralizes the coldness of the suban while accentuating the beauty of the stone. The sand should be uniform in size, uniform in color when viewing, much like the practices in Japan. Both Japan and Korea seem to utilize sand more frequently in modern times. And it's just in the last few decades that I've seen sand used in Chinese trades. Finer grained sands is used in smaller suban, while coarse grained sand is used in larger subans. And sand can be readily purchased in about 5 pounds, let's say 2 kilos packages. Accessory items, most frequently Korean stones are displayed without any accompanying figures. The use of small bronze or silver figures is very infrequent, less than it's seen in Japanese suiseki displays. Occasionally, painted clay or glazed clay figures are used. These are more similar to the ones found in China, in Chinese panjing displays, than the bronze or silver timpai in Japanese suiseki displays. So, to summarize, Korean Suseok has a long history of stone appreciation, first influenced by the Chinese, and then later by Japanese practices. And then in the last 60 years, 70 years, has developed in their own distinct form. There are subtle differences in the form and shape of the stone, with a greater emphasis on natural stones that help distinguish Suseok. There are also subtle to obvious features in the carved wood bases and the features and colors of ceramic trays that help to identify Korean Suseok displays. Further research is needed to determine the extent of this country's influence on other countries' practices and to uh, help to identify the uniqueness of the Korean stones. I feel that the Korean practices have much to offer us and have contributed significantly to our knowledge of the ancient Asian art of stone appreciation. And we are just beginning to scratch the surface on this. Going back again, I repeat what I said earlier. Suseok is a symbolic representation of the essence of natural elements. It possesses an eternity and immutability that humans cannot obtain. Therein lies its beauty. We are going to conduct further research, translations, and critical studies of Suseok to try to reveal the full extent of the Korean contribution in understanding the multifaceted relationship between rocks, people, and culture. This program would not have been possible without the generous help of many people who supplied books, valuable information, allowed us to use photographs from their collection. The Korean Suseok Association organized our visit in November 2024 and has been providing a wealth of information. Thanks to the translators, translated from Chinese to English, from Korean to English, their invaluable contributions helped us to understand Korean practices. Thank you very much. And at this point, I will close the presentation.